Okay, thanks everyone for joining our Conservation and Planning Atlas Introduction and eForum. I'm going to go ahead and pass the controls over to Tom Mewald, Data Coordinator for the NPLCC, and he's going to go ahead and introduce the new Conservation Planning Atlas.
Okay, thanks, Megan. My name is Tom Mewald. I'm the Data Coordinator for the North Pacific LCC. I spend half my time with LCC and also half of my time as a landscape ecologist with the refuge system. And I'll be talking about the NPLCC Data Management and Conservation Planning Atlas system. And so I just want to acknowledge a few other people that have been core parts of this project as well, and those names are down here. So first of all, I'll talk a little bit about the need for the NPLCC Conservation Planning Atlas and how this, kind of a bit of background on how this product and project developed. First of all, ever since the North Pacific LCC began, data and information coordination has been seen as a core need that the LCC could potentially fill, particularly around integrating conservation data across the region and looking at transboundary data. So we're really looking at data that transcends subject matter, organizational boundaries, and political boundaries as well. So this is a commonly articulated role for the North Pacific LCC to inventory data, to synthesize and bring data, different data sets together at the landscape scale, and also make data accessible to people as well. So a little bit about the history and evolution. Back in 2011, an ad hoc data management team was formed in the North Pacific, and one of the first things that we did was inventory the different data management systems that are out there that can help us not only manage our data, but fill these roles for inventorying and getting data out there to people. We identified ScienceBase and LC-MAP, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, and Databasin as two existing systems that could meet our emerging needs. And to kind of better understand some of our needs, we, in 2013, EcoAdapt was funded through the NPLCC to conduct a series of focus group workshops, and this was done by Eric Mielbrecht across the North Pacific LCC geography to assess needs and, trying to address what is the appropriate niche for the NPLCC in terms of data management. And so I'll talk a little bit about these focus groups. There was one in Portland, one in Seattle, one in Vancouver, and one in Juneau, Alaska. So the goals was to better understand the users. Who are the people the potential audience for this data platform? What are some of their tasks they need need some support in accomplishing, and what are some of the data and functions and capabilities that could better support those tasks? So we went through a pretty rigorous assessment meeting with people. And to make a long story short, we identified 5 initial highest priorities that the North Pacific LCC could meet. One is finding and accessing information. The North Pacific region is very data-rich in terms of conservation, natural resources data. Sometimes finding and all that data is challenging. Sometimes people can spend up to 50–75% of their time on landscape-scale planning projects, just finding and accessing and understanding what information is out there. There's a real focus on landscape-scale information. There's a lot of, states are looking at landscapes and within their states, but there's no existing portal for multiple state landscape scale data when this started, knowing that Western Governors Association and other tools have developed as well. Looking at a metadata system, so just understanding the quality of data. Fourth is really being thoughtful about how we position ourselves within an expanding world of online portals. I think we're all aware of the number of different data and information portals that are out there. We don't want to duplicate efforts or recreate any wheels, but how can we find a niche within this system? And that's one of the reasons we went with Databasin and the Conservation Planning Atlas, was because we're not recreating anything, we're building off an existing platform that is used in the conservation community. And lastly is supporting the practitioner community. So making sure that we have a system that will add value to the conservation planning practitioners out there to find and access data. So very briefly here, what we have is a schematic of how we're trying to get out to our audience of the natural resources and conservation community. So down here at the bottom, we have a lot of information that's collected by the North Pacific or developed by the North Pacific, and so we have a place where we have standards that are guiding how we manage that data. Second is where we're using Sciencebase and LC-MAP to manage and have a repository for data. And what we're really looking at here in the CPA is a gateway to information, a way that we could bring in data from other publishers, as well as data that we've not only produced, but maybe we've curated to some extent, and to get that data together in our Conservation Planning Atlas as our primary public interface to present data and information in an organized manner. So there's a lot of data and information out there in the North Pacific, we know. So, we can't include everything out there, so we have to come up with some criteria for including data in our atlas. So first of all, we really want to focus on data, that is produced by the North Pacific LCC, and by produced, this is data that we have funded or fostered the development of by working with our partners across the regions. So that's the fundamental aspect of our Conservation Planning Atlas. We want a tool to get that data that we've produced out there to people so that they know it exists and can start using it. Secondarily, we want to focus on consistent data sets across the whole North Pacific LCC, and so we can start envisioning the LCC as a region, the forest area in the North Pacific, and also we want to focus on high-quality landscape scale data that have web mapping services. Next is synthesizing and bringing together different data sets with a common theme. Fifth is adding value to different data sets that are out there. For example, there's a lot of information and data that's sitting as zipped folders of grid files or some sort of ASCII file. How can we add value by making that data more discoverable and interactive with a potential audience out there? And finally, orphan data. So data, those are homeless polygons and pixels that nobody has made a home for yet. So what this might be is, for example, people who have produced master's theses on landscape scale data projects, but they don't have a place to store or house the data. We could potentially play that role. So just to talk a little bit about LC-MAP and Sciencebase, the focus of this is really on data basin, but LC-MAP and Sciencebase plays an important part in the overall data management system. And I encourage you all to look up information on this. You can Google it and find out more. But basically, it's a USGS platform for making data accessible to many people. So now, with that's kind of the end of my PowerPoint presentation. Now I'll go directly to the site, and we can start interacting with it and showing you what is in there. So first of all, I want to make you aware that an e-forum for this webinar will be active until June 27th. If you are interested in providing feedback on the CPA, please keep in mind the topics below. Further instructions will be provided after the presentation. So things you may want to think about as you're viewing this is your experience with other data portals, if any, areas of interest and applicability to your work, desired data and links to other data portals, and others who would be interested in the CPA. And so now I'll go directly to our North Pacific LCC CPA. And so what you see here, when you get here, if you type in nplcc.databasin.org, is our website. This is the landing page, and I'll kind of walk through some of the main features now. First of all, a little bit about DataBasin. DataBasin is a product of the Conservation Biology Institute, and it's a tool that's been around for for quite a while for bringing different data sets together. There's a number of thousands of different data sets, and there are thousands of users and practitioners that are adding and actively curating this resource. We are following in the footsteps of LCCs, the South Atlantic LCC and some of the Southeast LCCs in the southeast part of the United States, where they've first developed these conservation planning atlases. And so we built off of their framework and transported some of those ideas into our North Pacific LCC Conservation Planning Atlas. So first, if you want to learn more about getting started, you can take a tour of the database and functionality, and I encourage people to do that. If you want to start browsing different data sets, you can do so here. You can browse the different data sets and maps and galleries that we've developed and that I'll go through. In here, you can also create your own map, import a data set, and do a number of other things. I encourage people to become members of Databasin, and that will allow you to have the full functionality of under the Create section. There's a community section where you can interact with different groups and members, and a little bit about your own workspace. So first, I'll start going from to right to left, and one of the first areas is on our landing page. I'll point out is first of all the purpose of this section, the North Pacific LCC land cover and protected areas, is to give a sense of the geography of the North Pacific LCC. So when you click on here, it will take you to a map, and it will take you to the different data sets that are in the map. For example, it's looking at a land cover data set, a 250-meter land cover data set with the different classes here. It comes up with a legend and different protected areas as well. You can zoom into the data set, to the map. It will come up with, you can interact with different parts of the map by turning on different layers as well. And so it takes a little time to load the data set, but as you wait, you'll soon be able to click on different parts of the map and come up with information about what the different colors symbolize, or you can start to use some of the identifying tools. So really briefly, that is the section of the map where we are interacting with the geography of the LCC. Now I'll point to the center part of the Conservation Planning Atlas, where this is really where we're focusing on the products that the North Pacific LCC has produced. And this is going to be the repository and storehouse for projects that the NPLCC has funded. For example, the North Pacific Climate Change Avian Vulnerability Assessment that was done in a partnership with Klamath Bird Observatory and Point Blue Bird Observatory as well. And so, we're starting to get projects completed from our 2011 granting stage. And so, as we get this, as people get these data, these projects completed, we get the data and we put them on the Conservation Planning Atlas is the general gist. So here you can see a lot of different data sets for different bird species and looking at their future and current distribution and density. So this will talk a little bit about the project. It will tell you about who produced it and some metadata for it. For example, you can then click on a data set and learn more about that particular data set. For example, this is varied thrush future density. And then you could, of course, open up the data in Databasin and start interacting with the data with the web mapping services within there. You can also start to overlay different data sets as well. And I'll get to some of those functions in the next section here. So here we have the data loaded now, and you can start to look at the density in certain parts of the landscape. So that's a brief overview of the central part of this. Again, that is the focus where we are storing our projects. And then on the far left part of our web page, we have what we're calling galleries. So these are basically curated data sets around these 5 different themes of coastal and marine resources, freshwater resources, climate change, anatomist resources, and terrestrial resources. And so these are very aligned with the North Pacific LCC science priorities. And I'll quickly walk through this. And as I do so, I keep in mind the criteria that I identified earlier for why we included different data sets in there. And that will get you thinking about why these different data sets in there, and hopefully get you thinking about some other data sets that we might want to include. So please contact me if there's any data sets you'd want to see in here, or it makes sense to be in here. So first of all, coastal marine resources. We'll start off with telling you something about why this is important to the North Pacific LCC, geography. And then down here in this section, this is really kind of the heart of the galleries. And each gallery starts off with a guide, what we call a guide or a case study. And these are guides that have been created by other people, but are part of the database and framework for not only looking at data and information, but giving some guidance on how you might use the data and information to inform your conservation planning or your decision-making process. So a lot of people find these very useful, and then they have links to some of the data sets to support those. So again, each gallery will start off like this, and then underneath there we have a set of curated galleries. For example, for coastal, we have historic shorelines and rate of shoreline change for Washington and Oregon. Again, this is a data set that is out there, was recently developed, but maybe it doesn't have web mapping services yet, so we were able to take that data and create web mapping services for those and make them more accessible so people can start to visualize shoreline and rate of change information. And from there you can also download the data and learn more about the data as well. We have a number of galleries and marine resources where we're looking at, we've culled together some different data sets, for example, marine bird density, and different data sets at different scales. We are focusing a bit on sea level rise. That's one of the priorities of the North Pacific LCC, so we brought together what data sets we could find on that. The other thing I want to point out in here, along here, are the tabs. Right now we're looking at gallery contents. If we go over here to external resources, I'll give a little bit of background on this. Databasing is a great tool for visualizing information that have web mapping services out there. As we all know that there's a lot of information and spatial data out there that don't have web mapping services, and they might be sitting in a place as a zip file, or you have to contact somebody to download the data or to obtain the data. So what we've done, and this is where the Atlas dovetails with another project that we have been working on over the past 2 years, and that's a spatial data inventory for the North Pacific LCC region. And this, in external resources, will give you an opportunity to interact with that inventory. So if you click on coastal, basically what this will be doing is it will be doing a search against science space, which I talked about briefly before, against a suite of metadata records that we brought together and synthesized for this spatial data inventory, and we'll be bringing these data up, the metadata records for these, in this website, in this external resources section. For example, you could click on here, cumulative impacts, and you could eventually then get down to the place where you can get the data or a link to download the data. So this is another tool, an approach that we are adopting within the LCC to make data more accessible beyond the resources that are strictly within the database and framework by expanding it out to science space. On to the next gallery. So I'll talk a little bit about freshwater resources. Again, similar situation. You'll see something here about the importance of freshwater resources and guide or a case study. And then a number of curated galleries here where we've brought together information that we thought would be valuable to people doing landscape scale conservation planning. Condition and impacts, for example, 303D streams, Oregon coast splash dams and log drives, and a number of different prioritizations as well, from the Washington State freshwater prioritization to a series of others. So trying to bring together data that, if I was doing a conservation planning effort, I would think would be interesting to know, as well as we spent time working with people and our GIS group to determine which data sets should go on here. On to the climate change gallery. Here we spend a significant amount of time. Here we're providing a few links to other climate change resources as well, knowing that there's a lot of climate change data out there and there's different data portals, and we're not going to try to recreate the wheel on this either, but trying to provide some links to some of the most relevant sites out there. So in here you'll find the baseline and projected habitat for species. For example, we worked with the University of Washington to get some of their data onto our conservation planning atlas that they produced as part of their Pacific Northwest Climate Vulnerability Assessment, where they modeled climate niche models for a number of different species, and we brought some of the species that were most relevant to the North Pacific LCC together here. In the climate projections for Western North America, we spent a significant amount of time bringing together data sets that were developed by the University of British Columbia. We really liked this data set because it was one that was a consistent downscaled model for the whole North Pacific LCC, something that is not in some of the other downscaled models. So we spent some time to bring these data together. Again, they were sitting as ASCII files on their website, and we spent some time making web mapping services for a number of the different parameters for different scenarios. And then we also have modeled future vegetation data as well. So hopefully together this suite of data can help inform conservation planning at the landscape scale. Again, would always be interested in hearing other data sets that we could potentially include. Another data set, another topic is Anatomist Resources, and of course this includes Pacific salmon and steelhead and coastal cutthroat trout and lamprey as well. So we've brought together a number of different data sets on assessments that have been done. We partnered with Wild Salmon Center to get some of their landscape scale data that they've pulled together into this into our website. Again, they have this data produced, but they don't have it out there in web mapping services, so we were able to do that. Fish passage barriers, a number of different habitat data sets, for example, intrinsic habitat intrinsic potential models, and also a number of salmon abundance models that cover the whole North Pacific LCC, as well as salmon population and conservation units. Our last gallery that we'll go over today is the Terrestrial Resources, and for this it includes, of course, a lot of different components. Connectivity, we brought together 25 different connectivity data sets that hopefully will tell a story and be useful for connectivity analyses in the region, so people can understand what data sets are out there. Ecosystem services, we worked with Dr. Dominic Della Sala to get data sets that they've produced around these topics of salmon abundance, timber harvest, and other ecosystem service parameters. Another data set, or kind of topic that we spent some time bringing together different data sets, are different conservation prioritizations that have been done across the North Pacific LCC. And just to give you an example of what you can do once these data sets are together, you can start to develop maps. And for example, this is where we brought together a map with all of these different conservation priority areas that have been identified and that are in that gallery. And for example, important bird areas, wild salmon strongholds, habitat areas, conservation opportunity areas. And then you can start to have a map on here, and you can start to interact with that map and zoom into areas and start to identify what areas. This could be really useful for if you're doing some conservation planning exercises to start to mash different data sets together and identify which areas are important, or why your particular area that you're interested in is important. And it goes quite quickly to bring up information. For example, this brought up a TNC Northwest Plan portfolio, and you can then see the record and why it was selected by TNC. So just to give you an example of what you can start to do with these data sets when they're together. So that concludes the gallery section, and now I'll walk through another example of how you can start to bring these different data sets together. For example, again, looking at the Wild Salmon Center salmon assessment for Chinook, we were interested in looking at Chinook populations. So the darker blue colors mean that these are healthier populations for life history, abundance, and productivity. And so if we want to start to understand how resilient these watersheds and places will be to climate change, we can take another data layer from our conservation planning atlas and overlay it. So right now we're looking at a stream flow metric database that was produced by the Forest Service and Trout Unlimited and others. And the brighter red colors indicate that these are places that will have less stream flow in the future, based upon the modeling that has been done. So here we can start to identify, here's a strong population, and it looks like there's going to be some significant changes in stream flow. It could be due to glaciation or something else. But anyway, just to give you a sense of what you can start to do with these data sets once they're up there. It's like having your own GIS system without having to have your own GIS system on there, and it's relatively easy to use, user friendly, and all the data is sitting there on our conservation planning atlas and extended as well through Databasin. If you really want to search for data sets, you can do so in Databasin, and it will give you different options for how you want to do that. For example, there's 566 data sets here, but you can also start to search for data sets within Databasin outside of the CPA. For example, here you can search all of Databasin as well. To give you another search, if you're searching for data, another option is to go to Search Science-Based Data Inventory, and this is something that you won't see on many other CPAs currently, but this will give you a chance to interact with the inventory, the spatial data inventory that I talked about earlier on Sciencebase. For example, if you're interested in climate change and salmon, you can search here, just type it in, and we'll do a search against the Sciencebase records that we've identified through our GIS inventory, and it will bring those data sets up. And you can click on that, and it will take you to Sciencebase outside of Databasin, but then it should give you a link to get to the data. Okay, so that one more thing I'll show, and that is the community function of this. There's a number of different groups that you can develop around a particular theme, and I'll give a few examples here. The first one is the Cascadia Partner Forum was developed. And so this is a group that's looking at landscape scale conservation planning in the transboundary region in Washington and BC. And so they've brought together a number of different data sets and members of the group. And then you can also see some of the content as well. So this will give people an opportunity to, this group an opportunity to interact with all these data sets and a further curated approach where they can really hone in on the data sets that are of interest to their conservation planning process. Another one I will point you to, and this is the one with the red lock there. That means that there are restrictions set on this. Not everybody can get into this group. So if there's data that's sensitive, or if there's features that you don't want publicly accessible to people, you can manage the membership to this, and so only certain people could get in. For example, here we were looking at some modeling of birds and butterflies in the region, and so we really wanted to focus on reviewing and vetting some draft products, and so we had a small group of people that were given access to look at those draft products. And so that, in a nutshell, is the version 1.0 of the North Pacific LCC Conservation Planning Atlas. And if there are any questions at all, please feel free to contact me. I'm Thomas Mewald at fws.gov, and I think we'll have that up as well. So thank you, and bye.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for that. Now we are looking to receive feedback on the Conservation Planning Atlas, so I'm going to go ahead and give a short tutorial on how to use the MeetingSphere forum. So to begin, take this address right here. You'll have to manually type it into a web browser and navigate to the MeetingSphere website. You should enter into a page that looks like this. Here you can enter in your name and your email address and then click Enter Session. It will ask you a few questions in a pop-up, and you will receive this box. So once you're in this screen, these are the 3 different activities that we have for you to answer questions to. Start with usability and click the Join button. That will bring you here to our activity screen. These bubbles here are our questions that we're looking for feedback. So you can do each one of these as you navigate through. To get in, you just double-click on one of the bubbles. It will pop up like this. And once you're in here you can see some of the responses that are already included. And you can add your comments or suggestions in this box right here. If you need to make any edits, you can use this button up here to the left. And then once you're finished with one bubble, you can use the X here to X out of it and return to a screen and choose the next bubble. Once you're finished with the set of activities, you can use this back arrow up here, which will take you back to the original screen, and you can navigate through the content activity and then the closeout activity. And thanks again, everyone, for participating in our webinar. If you have any questions, please contact Tom Mewald. If you want to find out more about the NPLCC, please visit nplcc.org, and you can visit the Conservation Planning Atlas directly at this link right here. Thank you.